As soon as I saw this watch, I knew that I wanted to own it. I wanted to own it, I wanted to wear it, I wanted it in my collection. It looked fun, it looked interesting, and it looked well made. I kept coming back to it, but there was one big issue with this particular watch. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I'm talking about watches. And I'm talking about the brand Bulova. Bulova's a brand that I've struggled with. And I've struggled with because I really like them. I think it's a great brand. But I've struggled to find watches from that brand that I really want to own myself. I continue looking through their range. I continue thinking, oh, this is a cool brand. But I continue to not find watches. And that is until this year. This year, I've actually found 3 watches that I absolutely love with this brand. Firstly, I found the Hack, which I really like. I then found the Computron, which I really like. And now I'm going to show you another watch, the Parking Meter. A watch which I think looks absolutely amazing, fun, interesting, but there's a big issue with it. And that issue is the price. This watch, the cheapest that I can find it online, is 600 Australian dollars. And I want to talk more about that price, but I'm going to do that at the end of the video. For right now, let's just jump straight into the review and check out my Bulova Parking Meter. So on paper, this Parking Meter 98B390 has a fair bit going for it. Firstly, it is a quartz chronograph, which means it's going to go on and on and on, which is great. You don't need to then set it. It is from their premium line of watches, and you can certainly see that in this packaging. It is a retro reissue, which is rather popular and quite interesting, and it's also a limited edition watch. Underneath the watch, we have a hang tag, give you the reference number. We have a card identifying that it is a limited edition, 4020 of 5000, a little information pamphlet, and a warranty card. But it's when you get this watch out of the box that you sort of notice immediately that there's something special about this, and that is because of the quality of this watch. I was not expecting it to be this good quality. It now sort of starts to understand why it is priced at 600 Australian dollars, because not only is the look of the watch really cool, but the case, the finishing, the polishing, the strap, even the box is something a little bit next level, and you can really identify that this perhaps is sort of a premium watch from Bulova. And if you're buying this one, or if you're interested in this one, you're interested in buying this one because of this really interesting, unique look to it. Not only to the case, but to the structure of the case, where the buttons and sort of crowns are positioned, but also that really funky dial and that parking meter shape that's in the center of that dial. And we've got 3 mixtures of colors because we've got the case, which is silver, we have the dial that is silver, we have an anodized section of the case, which is blue. We've got blue on the inside of the dial and on that parking meter. And if you look closely at all of those 5 hands, they all have orange on them. It really gives it a bit of a pop of color. At the top there, we have a 24-hour dial, so it moves around 24-hour. At the bottom, we have the chrono counter. In the center there, we have the chrono second hand, and of course, the hour and minute hands. Now, this is not a particularly legible watch, I have to admit. You're not buying this one for legibility. You're buying it for the quality and the fun factor of it. And if you look closer at the dial, you'll see that it is a vertically brushed silver, and that blue parking meter is actually applied on top. So you're getting a layering effect, which is really cool. Everything that is on there is all printed, including the Bulova, as well as all the minute tracks, as well as the dashes and all the bits and pieces. We do have a date window tucked in there at the 3 o'clock. It doesn't have any surround to it, but I think it sort of fits in there quite nicely and probably balances out the Bulova sort of name there, which is quite cool. We then have an internal silver rotating bezel that is moved around by this crown here. Outside of that, we have the blue tachymeter. Outside of that, obviously, we have it covered by a flat piece of crystal. And then we jump into this case here. And surrounding that, we have this blue anodized section, which I think looks really cool and gives it a really unique look. If it didn't have that blue section, I think it would be a real disadvantage to this watch, because I think it really adds and sort of flows the dial into the case. It has sort of like an anodized, but also sort of slightly brushed look to it. And the rest of the case is also brushed. And you can see it's brushed really nicely, except for that undercut sort of chamfer, which is polished. And you'll see there's a real curve there, which really makes it sort of sit quite well on wrist, which makes it really interesting, because when you look at it, it's a bit of a puck, or a hockey puck, I think people have described it as before. And you can sort of look at that and go, oh yeah, it might sit a little bit funny on wrist. That there is its saving grace, really letting it sit on wrist nicely. And you'll see it also has drilled end lugs. But if you think you're buying this one for lume, then perhaps think again, because the lume on this watch is not particularly amazing. but I probably wouldn't have expected this watch, this style of watch, to be particularly amazing. And because of the shape of this one, the design of this one, it has some really interesting dimensions because realistically the case is actually 43 millimeters, which is quite large. The thickness in the center there at the thinnest point is 11.8 millimeters. The lug-to-lug on the case itself is only 44.5 millimeters, making it much easier to wear. But as you can see, the crowns actually stick out a little bit. So from crown to crown, we're looking at 50.3 millimeters. But that doesn't affect the wear of it because they sort of stick out the edges there. The lug width is 22 millimeters. And on this amazing supplied leather strap, and it is something amazing, it is 94 grams. Now being a chronograph, obviously it has a whole heap of functionality. This one's powered by the Miyota Caliber 0S21. We can start the chronograph feature with this pull head click on the top left. We can also pause it with that one there, and we can reset it with the top right there. And it has that nice slower sort of reset, which perhaps takes a little bit longer for it to reset, but I think it looks so much better. Top crown here is to adjust the time, and the bottom crown here is to adjust that internal rotating bezel. Has a really nice soft action. There's no sort of lumps to it or sort of bumps to it. You don't feel it clicking at all. It is just a sort of a constant moving, very soft sort of feel to it, but it has a really lovely feel to it as well. It gives you probably the option to then track another time zone if you want, or use it as a secondary counting feature. Caseback is fairly simple, but it has some interesting information, talking about it being a chronograph parking meter, 50th anniversary 1973 to 2023, and being a limited edition. Limited, however, to 5,000, which, yes, is limited, but it's probably limited to a fair few amount of watches. And as I mentioned earlier, this is number 4,020 of that 5,000. And honestly, this strap is a standout feature of this watch. It's a beautiful leather, brown leather strap, lots of good stitching, really nice sort of interest factor as well. You'll see there has that sort of two lumps to it down the flanks of it, which I think is really nice. Beautifully soft. One of the best leather straps that I've actually encountered. Absolutely beautiful. Certainly a strap that I've even been taking this one off and using on other watches that it is because it is that nice. Hardware is also really nice, mixture of polished and brushed. Bulova stamped there, and a really nice sort of thick tang, which is good. I do appreciate a thick tang. On wrist, there's a few things to note. Firstly, I'm on the very last hole, and I have a 6 3/4 or around about 17 centimeter wrist. So if you've got a smaller wrist than mine, you won't be able to use this amazing strap. Secondly, on that last one, it's a little bit tight. To be honest, actually slightly more comfortable on this one. But because the watch head is actually most of the weight of this watch, if I wear it on the slightly more comfortable hole, it is very top heavy and does start to wiggle around a bit, which is one of the reasons why I've been wearing it on one of my sort of aftermarket sort of bracelets, which doesn't look quite as good as this on the strap, but it sort of helps balance out that weight. And as you can see there, it really conforms to the wrist because of that curvature, which is kind of cool. No, I was a little bit worried about how it would sit because it is that sort of rather interesting design, but I think it's fun, and it is a fun watch. Really, for me, this is not going to be an everyday watch. It's not why I bought it. I bought it to be a fun watch, and what it has turned out to be is a really good quality fun watch. So what do I like about this watch? What don't I like? And what would I change? Firstly, as I've mentioned a couple of times now, the quality is outstanding. Much better than I expected, and certainly something that is obvious when you have it in hand. Secondly, which I did expect, was the fun factor. It really is a fun watch. It is so different to everything else in my collection. And when I do feel like wearing something different, being a little bit fun, doing something just beyond my sort of more normal style watches, this is the one that I've been going for. And I absolutely love the combinations of those colors. I'm a big blue and silver person in general. I think they look really good together. But then having that flashes of orange really makes it pop for me. And I think on that nice dark brown, it just comes together really nicely as a package. What don't I like about it? Well, as I mentioned, it is rather top heavy unless I wear the strap really tight. And I'm not somebody that wears straps super tight, so that has been a little bit of a concern for me. Also, it is not something you're going to be buying for legibility. Certainly, I've had to sort of catch my eyes on it a couple of times in order to actually read the time. Hidden lugs probably are not my favorite, and I'm going to put it as a dislike. However, I am going to say, however, there is no other sort of lug option I think you could do for this watch because it would look weird if you added lugs to it. So it is part of the design and just something that you just have to accept. And I've been okay with that, but I guess probably overall, probably not my favorite feature. And then there's the price, $600, but I'm going to talk about that very shortly. So what would I change about this watch? Well, there's one thing that I would change because this does not have a running second. Yes, you can start the chronograph and leave the chronograph secondhand ticking away, but I don't tend to do that. Having a 24-hour dial at the top there, I don't really see the need for that. I'd probably rather that be a running secondhand. So if I was able to change anything, that's probably what I would do. And because this strap is so nice, I think I still prefer it with this strap, but I think it'd be nice, especially at this sort of price, for it to come with another strap option, perhaps something that had a little bit more weight, or perhaps something maybe silicone that had a little bit more grip to your wrist, that could maybe make it fit and feel a little bit nicer on wrist. So they're the things I'd probably change. But I want to talk about that price a little bit more, so let's flip back to me to do just that.
So as I said at the start, this watch at the cheapest I can find online is 600 Australian dollars. And that's not recommended retail price, that's the cheapest that I can find it online. The recommended retail price is actually a lot more than that. And that is a bit of an issue for me because that feels like a lot of money. Even $600 feels like a lot of money for this watch. And that was my first feeling when I saw this watch. Secondly, when I was actually able to get my hands on it, I was able to order it and get it here to my door. When I pulled it out of the packaging, I started to realize, oh, this watch is actually really, really well made. This is sort of a bit of a premium Bulova watch. This is not a basic Bulova watch. This is something a little bit special, which perhaps may justify the price tag a little bit. However, it still felt a little bit expensive. Now at this point, I want to say that I didn't pay $600 for this watch. I was lucky enough to find this one online, still new, still with the stickers on, but technically second-hand. Somebody out there had bought this one, had been excited about it obviously, but when they'd arrived on their doorstep, they pulled it out and they thought, not for me. So I was able to sort of be able to benefit from that particular situation, and I got this watch for less than 400 Australian dollars. And that to me is a much more comfortable price for this watch for me. And I was okay paying that obviously because then I purchased this watch. The third thing that I always consider when I'm buying a watch, and considering the price especially, is what else could I have bought for the same amount of money? What else in this same sort of genre of fun, interesting watch could I have bought? And this one makes it a little bit hard to do that because there's plenty of fun watches out there, plenty of interesting watches, plenty of watches you could buy and put in your collection that would be a bit different, a little bit out there, a little bit sort of fun. But if you want this particular style of watch, this kind of look of watch, it's going to be hard to find something else that is around about the same sort of look to it, or the same sort of feel as it, especially at this sort of quality. So I can't really point you into too many directions. But I can say, if you do like this watch and you want one, I think you should do the same as what I did. Just be patient, keep an eye on the market, and find one perhaps second-hand that is priced much better. And guys, if you enjoyed this video, maybe check these ones out next.